As I prepared for this first lesson reading, I couldn't help but think about the 1956 movie, The Ten Commandments, where the Israelites were often challenging or questioning Moses, like children on a car trip, asking, when are we going to eat? Are we there yet? Or I'm thirsty. So listen to the dilemma that Moses faces. From the wilderness of sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages, as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do for these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Go ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take your hand and the staff which you struck the Nile and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock and water will come out of it, so that people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Messah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" This New Testament reading gives us a lesson in political discourse and civility. If you believe that. The schism between the Jews and the Samaritans was quite bitter. The origin of their separation and hatred went back to the 5th century BC, so it just wasn't a recent occurrence. Interesting enough, John was baptizing in Samaria a while before Jesus traveled to what could be called a hostile land. Jesus came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the wall. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that you're saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him that he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but those who drink the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." The woman answered, "I have no husband." But Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying you have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshiped on this mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, The hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now it is here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, I will proclaim all things to us. He will proclaim all things to us. And Jesus said to her, I am he, the one who is speaking to you. Just then his disciples came. They were astonished that he was speaking with a woman, but no one said, What do you want? Or why are you speaking to her? Then the woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done. Can he not be the Messiah? Can he? They left the city and were on their way to him. So ends the reading.
I admit that I can at times totally nerd out. And I'm going to begin this sermon a little bit nerdly. I know that nerdly is not an adverb, but I've decided it needs to be. And being a little bit nerdly myself, I'm making it one. Earlier this week, I was listening to a video blog that I follow about some news that did not catch my attention on NPR. And now I do know that they had a story about it because listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me yesterday, they did mention this news story for about 3 seconds during the final round of Wait, Don't Tell Me. So I know they did broadcast about it, but it didn't cross my attention. I didn't catch about it. But during the past week, NASA announced and released a paper that said that Perseverance, the rover on Mars, had detected some things on the surface of Mars that we don't know how to explain without there having been life on Mars. Now, Hank Green, the blogger who I was following, who did this video, said that's very different from saying that there was definitely life on Mars, and very, very different from saying there is currently life on Mars. And still, the nerdy part of my psyche is rather psyched by the possibility and this announcement. So here's my incredibly oversimplified explanation of what's happened. Perseverance was analyzing some rocks that it had collected on a river delta that once fed a Martian lake. These rocks were made from mud that had spread out in the delta and that had been compressed, and the stuff very similar to how sedimentary rocks are formed on Earth. These rocks, however, have spots in them. Kind of hard to see in this video capture, but there are some dark spots and light spots in among the more reddish-brown general area of the rocks. And these spots, on closer examination, it's amazing to me that Perseverance actually has a laboratory that can do this level of science remotely. But they did a closer look, and there are surprising molecular structures, surprising because it would appear that energy of some sort, heat of some sort, would have been needed to create them, and a known potential source of the type of heat that would have been needed to create them on Earth would have been biology. There's no evidence that this place was hot geologically, nor that they were formed somewhere else and got deposited here. And so NASA scientists are asking, was it biology, or was it something about Martian chemistry that we don't know? Because I don't know a whole lot about Martian chemistry, not having ever been there. Well, listening to the video a second time, I noticed something that Hank Green didn't say. He didn't mention the connection between water and life. One of the reasons it's worth considering that biology might have been the cause of these molecular deposits is that the rocks formed in this river delta, which means there was water there. And we know that life on Earth would not exist without water. Every cell in our body, every plant that grows, every animal that roams the earth depends on water to survive. The human body, for example, is composed roughly of 60% water, and every metabolic process in our cells relies on water. Water is a universal solvent. It carries nutrients and gases to the cells of our bodies and carries wastes away from the cells of our bodies, as it does with all animals on Earth. Water enables our bodies to regulate our temperature. Water supports the chemical reactions that enable bodies to get nutrients out of what animals eat, just as it supports chemical reactions in plants to get minerals from soils and for photosynthesis to work. Water even helps cells keep their shape. Plants would not be able to stand up without water. When the first peoples of the Americas tell us and the rest of the world that water is life, they are stating a scientific fact, somewhat poetically, but a fact. Water is necessary for life. So is there any wonder that as the Hebrews were wandering in the wilderness, as Moses was trying to leave these formerly enslaved kinspeople and mold them into a community, as he was trying his best to help them form into the community they would need when they settled in a land that he believed they were promised, and they ran out of water, is there any wonder that they started complaining, arguing with Moses? In chapter 16 of Exodus, the issue is food. They needed sustenance, and God provided them with manna and quail to eat. But here in chapter 17, the issue is water. One can survive on minimal food for months, or at least weeks. One can survive without water merely for days. I've never been desperately hungry or thirsty. Still, I imagine that the greatest feeling of abandonment may well come when one is so thirsty they fear they may die. I do know what it's like to be out on the hottest time of the day and to be thirsty. I know how wonderful that first sip of cool water feels as it touches the lips and the tongue. And I know how wonderful it feels as it descends down the esophagus into the stomach. Though a good storyteller, I do think the story would have been more alive for me in John's gospel if he had said a little bit about the thirsts that Jesus and this woman who came to the well had. We're told that it's noon, the sun is overhead, and Jesus is by the well with no way to get the water out. A woman comes to draw water for herself and presumably for her household. Jesus asks her for water, and she starts verbally jousting with him. Oh, you'll share my water vessel right now because you're really thirsty, but as soon as your thirst is quenched, are you going to start being a typical judgmental Jew? Their little contest of words goes back and forth, several more rounds, until this unnamed woman goes back to town to talk to her friends about this stranger, leaving her water jug behind. Did you notice that when Mark read the scripture? She left her water jar behind. I like that John includes that detail. Leaving the water jar, leaving life. Water is life. She needed that water jar to bring water to her home on a daily basis. Leaving it behind would deprive her and her household of water. I wonder what she'd been drinking that would cause her to leave her water behind. maybe I'm reading too much into John's rich metaphors. Still, there are contrasts in this story that strike me. Jesus shows up without a water jar, without a bucket, without a way to capture and contain the water from the well. The woman shows up with her water jar, with her tool for capturing and containing the water. Presumably, the well is tapped into an aquifer that has supplied the well with water for generations. There's a reason the residents of that town say that this well went back to the time of Jacob. So the water isn't technically contained in the well the way it would be if it were in a cistern. Still, the water has the appearance of being contained inside the walls of the well. These images of contained, controlled water are so different from the water Jesus offers the woman. If you knew the gift of God and who it was who was saying to you, "Give me a drink," you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. In the Hebrew scriptures, living water is water that is flowing, as in a stream or coming out of the ground from a spring without being pumped or lifted. It's water that isn't contained. I think John is contrasting the idea of a bucket of water and a static vessel to hold a finite amount of water and a spring of water gushing up uncontained and flowing freely. It seems to me that by the end of the story, the woman has found in Jesus a source of water for a thirst that isn't purely physical. It seems to me that when she goes back to town to tell her neighbors about Jesus, that she has become not a static vessel of water. A better description might be that she's become a channel of water or a stream bed in which water flows. Human beings are thirsty creatures. There's an adage, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. Though often attributed to Mark Twain, this probably actually was written maybe a half a century after his death. But regardless of its origins, it seems to be true here in the United States. We fight, we debate, we legislate over water rights. We often attempt to bend water to our will. We try to contain it and control it. We dam it up to make electricity for irrigation and to keep areas downstream from flooding. Meanwhile, the global water supply is threatened. Back in July, ProPublica reported on the water crisis. As the planet gets hotter and its reservoirs shrink and its glaciers melt, people have increasingly drilled into a large, ungoverned, invisible cache of fresh water, the vast hidden pools found deep underground, the article says. Now, a new study that examines the world's total supply of fresh water, accounting for its rivers and rain, ice, and aquifers together, warns that Earth's most essential resource is quickly disappearing, signaling what the paper's authors describe as a critical emerging threat to humanity. The land masses of the planet are drying. In most places, there is less precipitation, even as moisture evaporates from the soil faster. More than anything, Earth is being slowly dehydrated by the unmitigated mining of groundwater that underlies vast proportions of every continent. Nearly 6 billion people, or 3/4 of humanity, live in the 101 countries that the study identified as confronting a net decline in water supply, portending enormous changes for food production and a heightening risk of conflict and instability. I'll stop reading the article at this point. I do not want to depress you any further than I have already. I'll just say that human beings need to be better stewards of water. Climate change is making droughts and floods more ferocious, so every fraction of a degree that we keep the planet from heating will make a difference. And I think we need to end the commodification of water. Water is not ours to hoard, dam up, divide, or capitalize. And that's why I was so delighted when last month a group of Indigenous teenagers became the first people in over 100 years to paddle all 310 miles of the newly undammed Klamath River. The story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well reminds us that all creation thirsts, and not just for water. As followers of the one who gives living water, we are to share that water. And I think we would do well not to think of ourselves as buckets or jars of water, but rather, let's be channels. Let's be living waterways that help distribute the life-giving abundance meant for all creation. So here are some sense practices that might help you keep this calling in mind this week. Touch some water. Getting to living water in suburban California can be difficult. Climbing down to the Alameda Creek may be a little hazardous and probably is frowned upon by Park District and police departments. I don't know about you, but the lake in Lake Elizabeth, not really living water. Getting to living water can be tough, but maybe getting to the ocean is easier. Or maybe we could just fill a bowl with water, purposely touch it. Notice how it feels on the skin. Notice how the temperature affects us. Notice the emotions that the touch of the water evokes. Taste some water. Or better yet, notice that you can't taste the water. That's the water I like best. Smell some water. And not only water from the sink. You can go by a stream or a lake or a shoreline, breathe it in through your nose and notice the smells. Low tide in the salt flats, or go by a pool and notice the smell of chlorine. I like walking by the holding ponds in the Niles Community Park different times of the year as the smells change. Hear the water. As your shower or bath water warms up, listen to it flowing. If you go by a fountain that's running, listen to it. Listen to the water coming out the end of a hose. And see the water. Look for water in the stream and in the kitchen sink. And look for water in other places, in the humidity of your own breath, in the moisture of the soil. God calls us to be channels, living waterways that distribute the gift of water and the many gifts it represents. Amen.